Andrew, thanks again for giving us the opportunity to benefit basically from all of your, can I say pros and cons, the positives and the negatives of like the years of experience in church planning. And one of the questions that we've been given by a church planner today is about discipleship. So how do we develop a culture of discipleship and keep people moving through that all of their lives so that they continue to mature and maybe learn to serve themselves? How did you go about building a culture of discipleship?
A bunch of quick thoughts, not with great depth, of course, given time, but a couple of quick things. When you're church planting and you're in launch phase, whatever you do, don't turn launch phase meetings into simply working out how to run this church plant. Even at that phase, you as the leader need to be the person who's passionate about disciple making. And so it ought to just flow out of you everywhere you go, even from those very early times. Whenever we talk about any issue, I'm actually more concerned to grow you, even though you're part of my core group and you're one of the real key guys here. I just want to grow us together. And so that's a constant vibe you need to cultivate, looking at the scriptures together prayerfully in every context you can. All of that is part of who you are, and it should shape your core group times and your early times. The other key thing to bear in mind, therefore, is to be proactive. I think as leaders, we aren't people who are just setting the table of a smorgasbord where if they come and get it, they will, and I pray they do. No. That's too passive, too responsive. I'm not just the teacher putting forward ideas. I'm more like, the Apostle Paul, who wasn't just wanting to teach people, he was wanting to transform lives. Now I live, that you stand firm in the faith. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. I'm kind of pained until Christ is formed in you. The whole language of every part of my fibre and being is focused on seeing maturity happen. There's a real proactive amount. The key to proactivity is knowing where I want to get to with someone and knowing the means that God has given me to get there. The Colossians 1 and 2, it's the Word of God, preached, taught, modelled, prayed over, and so on.
Let me hold you up there for a second, because I love this idea when we're talking practically about proactivity. So obviously I want this person to grow in Christ and mature. And you're saying that, say, for each core team member at least, or those people that you're particularly moving on, you've got an idea as to where they have to move next, or what sort of goals they should be setting themselves? And do you discuss that with them? Do you talk that through?
No, not always. So, look, my whole ministry's run on that proactivity of I have very clearly in mind where God would have us all get to, and I've worked hard to break it down so that it's not a vague idea. So obviously the scriptures, where does God want us to be? He wants to form Christ in us. He wants to mature us. But if you don't break it down a little bit further, then that just becomes a motherhood statement that you don't actually proactively pursue. So, we've broken it down into... we operate very broadly with as people probably know, the M structure, and that for us sets a broad set of categories of where maturity is heading. It's heading into, magnification of the heart religion, membership, the Christian community is the heart of who we are, and scriptures, serving, mission. There's the very broad categories. But we've done a bit more work to break that down further. And if you like, we've broken that down into 3 subcategories of, understanding, character, and skills, the classic thing. But in each area. So I want to see someone, I have very clearly in mind that every person I'm working with, I want to see them understand the gospel, be able to explain the gospel, have dealt with big issues like predestination, authority structure, how does the scriptures work in comparison to other authorities. There's a number of touchstones theologically, a number of areas of character in terms of career choice, family, godliness, and a number of areas of skill. And so with everybody I'm working with, everybody we're working with, we've got this paradigm in mind where we want to get you to. And you're identifying where a person's at, where are the touch points of strategic possible movement or impediment. And so I'm doing that with all the people all the time, yeah.
We'll actually provide some links with this video to some of your talks on the 5M structure, so people can actually follow that up more if they like. But let's segue a little, because one of the things you're talking about is service as an indicator of their growing maturity and where they're going to sort of become more like Christ. A lot of the people who have written into us have actually mentioned the struggle of finding leaders and even maturing leaders. Can you talk a bit about that? Because there's one thing about maturing everybody. Does maturing leaders have a different approach to it, or a more intensive area that you focus on?
Yeah. So if we're going to multiply the work, we need to raise up leaders, and we need to learn how to lead leaders, not just lead people into personal growth. We need to lead people to translate their growth into helping others grow, so we multiply the work. There's a bunch of quick thoughts. You're looking for the person in church or in your core group or the growing number who might be connecting. You're looking for the person who is showing evidence either of a passion for the things of Christ or leadership gifting and ability. And so you're trying to work out if, as soon as I see someone in this group of 20 who's got a real hunger to grow, if they've got any abilities at all, I want to get alongside them to nurture that, deepen that, and enlist them in joining with me in giving that hunger to others. And so you find the person with a hunger to grow. There are some people in your group who will be have natural leadership, and with them I'm wanting to connect to actually give them the hunger to grow. So you're doing both ends. Now, in my estimation, I think the ones who've got a hunger to grow are the best people to work with, whereas the ones who just have leadership ability and not yet a hunger, there's a real spiritual
I see what you're saying
challenge
there, because one is a skill set that you can, fairly humanly speaking, teach, but the other one is a work of the Spirit, and you could, if the Spirit's not going to move them that way, or if they're not in fact actually growing in maturity, then that can be an issue. Let me throw you a slightly different curveball to finish off. There's a huge hurry up and urgency in church planning, obviously, because often people sort of land on the ground and they've got the core team, but it's not long. If God's blessing the work, the core team itself is insufficient for the task, and so people are looking for leaders. In your experience, can you be too quick in trying to find leaders? How much time would you say? I mean, everyone's a special case, but what sort of time frame do you think about when you're training someone up? Is it months? Is it years?
Yeah, this is the art of leadership and Christian maturity, in that, Paul warns us not to lay hands on someone too quickly. The young convert falls into the trap of the devil and so on. In some contexts, though, like what's too quickly? In a very established church context with high-level leadership expectations, too quickly is doing it, in years, within a year. Whereas in a church context, plant context, it might be months. So all of that's quite tricky and takes considerable skill. Two things at both ends of the problem. We need to take risks. The reality is that if we're too controlling and too cautious in giving leadership to others, we won't make an impact for the things of Christ, and it can portray a failure to trust the Spirit and be controlling.
Yeah.
So we can be far too cautious. We've got to take risks. But of course, on the other hand, there's a number of church plants that bear testimony to giving eldership responsibilities or key leadership responsibilities to men that were far too soon. They didn't know who they were. For mine, I'm trying to lower the bar all the time because of the problem of leadership creep. I don't think
leadership creep?
Yeah, well, we call it leadership creep. It's not creepy leaders. It's the problem of, as you grow a ministry, your expectations of quality of leadership grows with the development of the leaders you've got in place.
Before you know it, everybody's got to have a PhD, yeah.
Yeah. So when I preached my first sermon, like, I don't know, I was 19, 20, and I was running a youth group at 20. But in our context now, our leaders are all developing so much, you'd never hand to a 19-year-old ever, because we're all, so your expectation of leadership creeps with the quality of the leaders. You've got to keep actively pulling it back down. And the things I'm looking for as a minimum, I keep actively trying to do that. I want to see people who are desirous of seeking first the kingdom, just have that hunger to go, I want Christ to be central, who love the Word and see the Word as the place where they'll grow and be nurtured. They may not have all the skills in it. They may not be a great Bible reader yet, but they know that's where to go. And I'm looking also for loyalty. Someone who won't be a loose cannon shooting me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they love the Lord and want to seek first the kingdom, they love His Word, and they've got sufficient maturity that they want to stand by the leadership of the church and not be undermining and destructive if things go foul, then I'll take a risk with them.
Yeah, but they can't be such a risky proposition that you're a little terrified about where it might end up in 6 months' time.
Yeah, and the things that would indicate that they're too risky are that they're unstable, and they've got that instability about loyalty, because that's where it really goes sour when someone, we rub up against each other. I want to push in a direction, and they're not sure they want to go, and they don't have the stability to accept and come alongside. They want to politicise it. They want to get numbers around them. If you see any evidence of that, I don't go near it, that kind of leadership person. Yeah.
Andrew, that's really helpful, and for such a brief statement, you've given us lots to think about. Look, if people have questions, we'll actually put an email address up so they can send them through to you. But that said, we'll look forward to benefiting from this in another time. Thanks very much.
Good on you. Okay.